which most users don't use, then you drill them down. Anything else?
It has to be screen independent. The device screen independent.
Device independent, right? So in other words, what you're saying is the same user interface should work across different devices.
Right. Yeah.
In the same way?
Yeah, the same UI should be supported both in landscape and portrait mode.
Okay, so isn't that dependent on the device again? Isn't that something which, if you're using a Nokia device and you're used to a certain, for example, now you've been using the same Nokia device for over a year, and you're used to pressing the left button to find for your action key and your right button for all your options. And if the user interface, a certain application comes in, which has been on a previous device, using the right soft key instead of the left soft key, then what do you do?
So what I'm talking about is like user's application which I'm using in my Nokia device. Suppose it has a different screen size, and when I put the same application in a different Samsung device, which again is a different screen size, so it should really be compatible with that device.
Yeah, so that is the hygiene factor, right? The application needs to work within that screen size. What do you say? So that's it. You're just talking about it should fit in that screen. Okay, fine. But that it needs to do, the person needs to use it, right? If they see only half of it and don't see the go button, then it's not even going to be used, right? Okay. Anything else?
The data.
Yeah, this is. I think our first. Second. Sorry?
It should match the user's profile. Let's say the root
Right. So
it's for kid, apart from the intuitive and all that, but it's for kid or something it should find the user.
Right, exactly. So that's what we're talking about. So that's where we're coming from here. When we say your user interface should be different for your mom or for your boss or for your kid, for example. Well, first of all, obviously the user interface needs to define, first of all, whether your parent, the parent of the kid has actually given permission in before you actually get the kid to use a certain application, right? If it is something online, for example, stuff which we have done with Candyman, for example, where when you get onto the Candyman site, the kid has to get permission from the parent before they actually access the website. Is that something like that what you're talking about? And then once you access it, it should be more pictures because kids understand pictures and not text? Okay.
It needs to be fast also.
Oh, sorry, where's the question? Yeah?
It needs to be fast. We need not wait forever for the next page.
But doesn't that depend on the usage? If you're using a banking application and you're worried about security, then you wouldn't mind waiting a little longer as long as you're sure nobody would be able to hack into it?
The more we wait, for example, say in the banking application, the more worried we are whether the transaction is successful or not. I mean, we are waiting for 15 seconds, 20 seconds, we don't know what's happening. So basically, the interface needs to be a bit fast and doesn't make us wait forever.
I agree, but the point is, as a user, you would wait longer for a banking application than for something which is just an application as a camera or something like that.
It depends upon what is the application, of course.
No, but would you be willing to wait longer for a security application compared to a normal application, say, access your mail versus access your bank account?
So how would we know that this is more secure? I mean, that something he has to wait longer for is more secure.
No, isn't it automatically the kind of communication which comes in which says my banking application uses Be Secure, uses verified by Visa, uses more levels, asks for more passwords. So it is obviously more secure than just a simple username and password.
But what he's talking about is loading one screen to another.
That's what I'm saying. Sometimes loading one screen to another also adds in an extra password to load onto the next one, or has an additional security like HTTPS or something like that, which takes a little additional time.
I think the point here is about the feedback, giving the feedback to the user.
Okay.
He doesn't mind waiting as long as he knows what's happening.
Exactly.
Yeah, as long as the loader or something tells you that it will load where you have a 60% or 70%. But if there's no loader, then you have a problem, right? I think that addresses that kind of problem.
Responsive communication, what is telling?
No, responsive communication is a feedback that you're taking time, which is like a loader screen.
No, loader is just telling me, okay, 60%, but it should tell what it is doing. It's going through password securing.
And if it's too complicated, sometimes if you keep saying you're loading this cookie, loading that cookie, and a user is maybe a mother or a kid, they don't need to know what it is, right?
So may not be at that level, but at least just don't tell in numbers which is flat, right? It doesn't make sense. 5%, 10%. tell me, okay.
But if you're a developer, you'd be interested. If you're not a developer, you wouldn't, right?
No, I'm just saying, that's what I'm saying.
No, I'm asking, if your father was using an application,
Right.
would he be interested to know what all components are coming onto his computer to open a certain, say, Yahoo?
He'll be interested in what is happening. He won't be interested in the cookie.
Yeah,
But he'll be interested, did my password go through? Yes, I'm, securing
Terminology differs, that's all.
That's the difference I'm talking.
Right, so all I'm saying is a loader or something would help in that case, right?
Yeah, a loader with some communication saying that
Information.
10% means this has happened, 20% means this has happened, 40% means this has happened. So that is
So
what
you think your father would like something like that?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
To put it the other way, password successful, authentication successful, handshaking, some basic words to tell them that things are happening.
Okay.
See, to put it in the other way, the 10% or the 20%, whatever you say, right, it should be in contact with the server. I mean, to the user, that should give you a confidence level saying this is a real 10% or a real 20%.
Right, wherein you actually see the loader moving across and you're sure that once it reaches 100 it actually loads. Your worry would be if you see 100% loading and still don't see the application launch is when you would be worried, right, as a user?
Exactly.
Okay.
But when you say 20%, it should be, it should be approximately 20%. It should not be like one of those, you have 5 steps and you have completed first step, it should not be 20%.
Agree.
Because the
Agree.
fourth step,
The final point is the user won't even know 20% corresponds to 20% of the back or not, but his question is 100% should correspond to 100% of the back. Yeah.
So my question is regarding my idea about the user interface. Basically, the application should make use of the hardware capabilities of the device. The UI should basically, suppose the phone has a QWERTY keyboard, there's no point having a virtual keyboard on the UI of the app, because the phone already has a, say, hardware keyboard. There's a duplicate functionality built into the UI.
Right.
You should couldn't have too many ways of getting towards single functionality. I think a lot of apps have the problem. Like the UI, basically there are duplicate ways to get into it. Sometimes it might be useful, but to make things simple and keep the UI simple, I think you must avoid
Right. So one example is, for example, the Volkswagen Polo. There was a iPhone game launched for it, where you had a left and right button within the game, which you didn't need to because it already had the accelerometer where you could move around, which normal racing games do. So basically from that kind of point of view, right? But for that, then again it fights again with his point of view, saying that it should have the same user interface across multiple devices, which it can't, because different devices have different capabilities, right?
Yeah, so I think having the same UI to a certain extent is fine, but then you need to make sure that your app uses the device capability to the maximum. For instance, you have, say, your phone of suppose a touch screen, and you have a boring keyboard-based UI for your app. You're not using the touch functionality to the fullest extent.
So that's the basic point, right? The user interface doesn't need to be uniform across multiple devices, but it needs to use the maximum capabilities of the device. For example, when you do something for, say, a Sunsilk gang of girls, Sunsilk will just say put your logo there and use the color code, which is there. That for them is the aesthetic user interface. But the actual functional user interface depends on the environment, the device environment, what kind of facilities it provides. Are you using an SMS-based application? Are you using MMS-based, web-based, or moving into an embedded app, right? For example, if you use an SMS link, you're limited to certain features, but you provide those features, but you provide hygiene factors in terms of the aesthetic UI versus the functional UI, which is based on the device, right? Anyway.
Make it stylus-free and single-hand.
Stylus-free depends on the device, right? If a device uses a stylus, how can it be stylus-free?
No, make a user so that it is compatible with single hand.
Yeah, but that depends on whether the device itself supports that, right? If a device uses stylus.
Yeah, normally, nowadays touch screen, it will be able to access it.
No, I'm only trying to tell you is, if there is a device which uses a stylus, that means it's not built for touch, correct? So then, even if you do build, which you can, to a certain extent, build something which uses touch, but you're still compromised versus a fully touch device like maybe the iPhone. Like for example, you're talking something like Facebook now launching a touch-only website, what they call the touch site, touch.facebook.com, where you're saying that if it's a touch screen, use touch, don't use stylus, right? Okay. So that's even if the device uses stylus, you should still use touch.
Maybe. It depends. Technology, it varies. No? But
No, it's not technology, right? Like the way we discussed in the previous session with Mr. Chitnis, the idea is that if you do something for touch, you're increasing the size of the buttons. You're reducing the number of buttons which are there on a screen because you're putting it for the purpose of touch, which means that you have to ensure that whatever buttons are there, the buttons which the user wants. Which means you sit in terms of the user functions. The functions which the user wants the most are sitting on top and the remaining you scroll down. But you reduce the number of functions with touch. Which, if you had something which was extremely complex, say for example a news website, like we saw Yahoo, if it's a news website, you have to put a lot of tabs, a lot of news, say an RSS reader for example, right? You have a lot of news which at one shot you want to know which article you like Internet Vibes which you use. Then you can't use touch because